Hello, my name is Dr. Ruthie. I'm a professional sexuality educator and a relationship coach over at exploringintimacy.com. But today I'm here answering your questions thanks to the good folks at funwares.com. And we're talking about sex and relationship topics. You can send over your questions through my website at Exploring Intimacy or at Ask Dr. Ruthie at funwares.com, AskDrRuthie. I've gotten a few questions lately about different types of fantasy tips that people wanted, and one that I've gotten several on over the last few weeks is the fantasy of having threesomes, especially for couples who don't want to invite anyone extra into the bedroom. So they really want to carry out this fantasy, but keeping it as a fantasy and not bringing in a third person. This is a fantastic idea. Fantasies about adding an extra person, whether it's a third or a fourth or a 25th, whatever it may be, are really, really common and really popular. These can be very exciting fantasies, and if it's something that you can enjoy with your partner without jealousy getting in the way or anything like that, then I think it has the potential to really make a stronger relationship for you as you both explore your sexualities without any of the risk or any of the hassle of bringing in an extra person. Now, if what you're interested in is how to bring in an extra person, drop me a line because that's a little bit outside the scope of this particular video, but that's a fine idea as well, as long as you can work it out with your relationship in a healthy way. Okay, so back to keeping it a fantasy. How do we do it? Well, we know it's popular, but we need to make sure that just because it's something that people think about doesn't mean that the two of you are necessarily on the same wavelength about it. So the first step is to find out what turns you on about this whole idea. And then the next step is to find out what turns your partner on about this whole idea. And hopefully both of you have things about it that turn you on. Now, you may say, oh, of course, I know what they would be turned on by about this. And they may be thinking the same thing about you. But you don't know until the two of you talk about it together. And it should be a really fun conversation. So why not enjoy that together over a cup of hot cocoa on a cold February evening, right? Or any time of year, whenever you happen to be watching this. So, having this conversation with each other, what is it that you envision in this fantasy threesome? Again, no pressure to make it real. This is just something that the two of us are going to enjoy together. What kind of person would you want to invite in, or kinds of people? How would you want to meet them? What sorts of tones or personalities would you want out of this fantasy threesome? What kind of sex acts would you be interested in happening? Would they be hitting on you? Would you be hitting on them? How would the three of us be interacting in your fantasy? And you know what? If you need to, go ahead and take some notes. The two of you probably won't precisely match up. Hopefully, there will be some overlap. But you guys will like different things, and that's fine. You can switch back and forth within the same encounter with your partner. You can kind of move the fantasy back and forth for each other, or you can kind of take turns. This fantasy's a little more for you, this fantasy's a little more for me. That's perfectly fine. And you may find that exploring the other person's fantasy gives you new things you didn't even know would turn you on, or vice versa. You may also find that your partner's take on the fantasy isn't quite the same as yours and doesn't quite do as much for you as your fantasy would do for you. But watching how much it turns them on can be so much that it becomes maybe even better than yours because you get to see your partner's pleasure in it, which can be really hot as well. So once you've talked about this and taken a few notes for yourselves and you've got an idea of who and what and when and where and how and maybe even a little bit of why for each other, and you've communicated that well, it's time to consider taking it up a notch while you're in bed together. Now, hopefully, that interview type conversation also inspired a little bit of fun between the two of you, but if not, that's okay. And if it did, we can still take it even farther. Now, of course, because I love talking about sex toys, one of the ideas I'm going to bring up is the creative use of sex toys. For instance, if at least one of you in your relationship is a male, you can take a look at stroker type sleeves that are of good quality with lubricant, and you can be kissing your male partner and using, one hand to explore their whole torso or wherever your hands want to roam, and let the other hand use the toy on them. Same goes for an anal toy with any gender, right? If you have at least one female partner, you can be using a vibrator or something like that. I do tend to suggest vibrators instead of just dildos for this sort of play because it can be really hard to coordinate both hands and the kissing and all this sort of stuff. So the vibration kind of makes up for a little bit of coordination concerns oftentimes, especially if you use it as an outie. But you know what? You do, maybe I'm just the uncoordinated person here. You do whatever works for you. There are certain toys that look very realistic, and sometimes bringing those in can be very enticing. But that by itself is not enough. You may even be doing those things already. So we need to try and take it to the next level, and here are a couple of suggestions for that. One of them is including porn together. Now, this can be something for the two of you to watch at the time and kind of imagine that you're there. If your fantasy, involves, let's say your fantasy involves another woman, there's plenty of porn of women just touching themselves solo on the screen. That might be something that interests you to really bring it into that threesome fantasy, or any other kind of porn that feels like it's going to work for the two of you and your fantasies. So it can be someone to kind of visualize as being a part of it and kind of pretend they're there with you. But it can also just give you somebody to talk about. And we're going to talk about that dirty talk in a second. But when you are doing the dirty talk, it kind of helps to have a person in mind to talk about. It could be, the hot nurse that just got hired on the floor and you like watching him do his rounds, whatever it is that works for you. But sometimes bringing in a porn figure, it might reduce the jealousy because it's not somebody who's really real life. It depends on what you guys get jealous about. And B, like you're both seeing the person at the same time, so it's very easy to talk about it. And porn can be very inspiring for both men and women. Research shows that DVDs, so action, bodies moving, is appealing to all genders and sexes. So find something that you feel good about and like to watch together. You can either watch it ahead of time and then talk, or you can watch it during and talk, or some of each. And the theme there is talking, right? So we want to bring the dirty talk. Anytime we do fantasy role play, there's an element of performance and theater to it. Don't let it get you anxious if that's not something you're usually into. It's okay. Most of us are a good storyteller when we're in our element. We know how to tell that joke. We know how to tell that story about the crazy person in traffic, whatever it may be. And even though sometimes we get shy, those same storytelling experiences can flow right on into dirty talk and make it work wonderfully. Your dirty talk might include a play-by-play of what the other person, this fantasy person, is doing at the time. How they're looking at you, how they're looking at your partner, what they're thinking about you and your partner's bodies, how they're touching you and your partner, maybe even encouraging your partner to close their eyes and imagine you are that other person, and that so your partner and the fantasy person are making out and you're over in the corner watching in this fantasy or whatever turns you on, that play-by-play. General descriptions can be great. If storytelling isn't your thing or isn't what matches for the two of you and your fantasies, then just talking, imagining the other person's body, imagining what the other person likes. Instead of saying, this is what they're doing to you now, think about it, or this is what they're about to do to you, just talking about them in general and letting the other person's imagination pick up the slack. Like I said, it's fantasy is storytelling. So you can also go online or go to the bookstore nearest you or online that happens to sell erotic stories and find ones that you can read to each other or that you can highlight the good parts and swap the stories back and forth to get a better idea of what each other likes to read about. I'm sure there's plenty of threesome specific stories out there that you can find, or foursome or moresome, whatever works for you. I don't want to limit your numbers by any means. In brief, what you need is whatever it takes to get your imagination rolling. It doesn't necessarily take an extra person to get your imagination rolling. Combining any of these things together can really do it and can be a lot of fun. And if it doesn't quite work out the first time, that's the perfect excuse to give it another try until you guys hit that magic combination of stimulating situations. I'm Dr. Ruthie. You can visit me and drop me a line at exploringintimacy.com. Lots of thanks to funwares.com for making this video possible, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks.